30.
Yes, 2 Samuel.
All right.
15, starting at verse 30.
All right, we're ready.
Okay, but David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went, barefoot and with his head covered. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and they went up weeping as they went. And it was told, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. While David was coming to the summit where God was worshipped, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat torn and dirt on his head. David said to him, If you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I have been your father's servant in the time past, so now I will be your servant. Then you will defeat for me the counsel of Ahithophel, and not Ahithophel. Are not Zadok and Abiathar, the priest, with you there? So whatever you hear from the king's house, tell it to Zadok and Abiathar, the priest. Behold, their 2 sons are with them there, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and by them you shall send to me everything you hear. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city just as Absalom was entering Jerusalem. Okay, I'll stop there.
This would make a great movie.
It would. Yes. It could make an episodic TV series.
It would. You know, here's the thing. As you're reading this, you're seeing the way it's like a chess game. Nothing's changed in 2,000 years as far as with government and policies and the elite. What amazes me, though, is how I think sometimes we forget God uses people. I mean, we think, God, you do this. Yeah, he will, but through his sovereignty, his will through people is how he gets the job done. Mm-hmm. Look right here. I mean, whether you like it or not, God lets this happen.
Right. Now
you got to figure out why. But he's using this guy to go behind the scenes to be a spy, basically. Instead of just saying, no, he's my king. David, get back in there, guys. So I'm there. Let me play out. And I just find it kind of intriguing, to say the least.
Well, it's intriguing because we get to know the intricate details about how God is going about doing this.
Right. Yeah.
Usually we only see it from the outside, right? And we say, oh yeah, I can see how God worked in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, because David gets, he leaves, and Absalom comes in, and then David eventually gets. But you don't see the part of God, saying do this or instructed David to do this or how you. You don't see all of those, like you said, the chess moves. You just see the results usually. Right. But here we get to see the
some of that moving.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, and I find it's something I have to ponder on as far as everyday life with us. I really do. I mean, sometimes we just take God, and even in our prayer life, you got to look at this story and say He uses people, so He's going to use you. Open your eyes up, like you said. But you missed the forest because you're looking at the trees. Mm-hmm. And I think this story, man, when you read them, like, this is the way God operates. And don't say He can't use this person. You don't know.
Right.
That's a great point. Because when you read this story, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to judge.
Yeah,
I was thinking of screaming at him. It's the judging. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. I mean, that's the first thing you want to do is you want to judge. Wait, he's putting spies back in. You know what? And so it's our tendency to want to judge that when, like John was saying, who are we to judge? That's how God is going to move or whatever in that situation. So.
Yeah. So we have some players here, some people we may or not be familiar with. Ahithophel was one of the guys. Is among the conspirators of Absalom. If you did a flip back to verse 12 of this, he's there. He's one of David's counselors, and Absalom basically calls him over. They have a conversation. That's part of that conspirator type of thing. Mm-hmm. So we have this counselor. There's these other people that he mentions, these names. There's Hushai comes into play. We'll talk about him in a little bit. There's also the Zadok and Abiathar that are there. They were sent earlier, just in the verses just before this. David had said, "Take the Ark of the Covenant back," and that. And then we also see some his sons, their sons, right? Zadok's son, Ahimaaz, and Jonathan. I like Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan's easy.
It's just an easy name.
It flows out.
I like that guy. So there's these people, and it's interesting that God puts various people in your life, whether it be for you or against you.
And you mentioned a couple of these characters' names. I say characters loosely. It's important to know, to see who they are, in a sense. They're priests. That's important when you look at the Jewish back tradition. I mean, the priests. The priests were kind of like they're a separate entity in a sense.
Yeah.
So so David still, in a roundabout way you can look at it, has the support of the priests, because they're leading with the ark, and they understand God's covenant they made with David. And I'm sure he shared that with them as far as, and they knew that, and they knew Absalom was wrong. But in the end, if you know, like that's what I'm saying, they're priests, so they're supporting their king. So.
And as far as Absalom is concerned, they're untouchable.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. You hit it.
Why would you say that?
Because they're the priest. They're not for Absalom, and they're not for David. They're the unbiased priest of God. So they can pretty much go and come as needed. I mean, they've got the Ark of the Covenant with them.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, they're in charge of the worship of God. So they can, they can go and be and hear and whatever, and not be ostracized. They could be ostracized, right? Mm-hmm. But it would be at great cost.
Yes.
Because the people would see see that as more of a rebellion than it would be against the king.
Yeah.
And we have to remember, because as you're speaking again, I'm thinking, look at the law, and when God set up the covenant with Moses, the 11 tribes were given an inheritance. The only one tribe that wasn't were the Levites, and that's their job to take care of you, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where their position, they can go. That's how they can go anywhere they want, basically, because they had no inheritance. They were just there to take care of the ark. So I think you're right. At a great price, if you want to take down a priest, great price. And I think that's why they almost are untouchable.
Interesting.
Because we got to look at it from our laws, how we have now. Certainly, we know we can't do.
Right.
Same thing back then. There's certain people, priests, that, usually when they got in trouble was because they went to worship idols and stuff.
Right. I find it interesting that that throughout all this, and maybe it's because I've not grown up in this kind of culture, that the people have such a connection with their God. Just everybody. It seems like everything stems around their God here. Unlike here in the United States, we manipulate stuff not regarding what God would want or think or say or anything. But there's this kind of that thing there. David's focus is on his kingdom, but also the Ark of the Covenant. It's just an interesting thing. The priests that are involved, all of it's just kind of it's something odd to me because I'm not used to that.
And you know what? To put a parallel with us, let's say, it's like us messing with our Constitution in the United States. It's kind of the same. That's what I kind of compare it to, because I'm like, I got to go back in their time. So the only way I can think like that process would be their law set up a guy was like their Constitution. Right. Don't go against this. Right. Us, same thing. When people mess with the Constitution, you get people getting upset.
And maybe it's don't go against directly and publicly.
Right.
Right. So
exactly.
You do it kind of subversively, maybe.
That's right. Exactly. Because you're right. I'm with you. It's kind of hard, and you just
And so one of the things that are odd and hard for me is the weeping as he went barefoot with his head covered. What do you think that is meaning? It's obviously a sign of mourning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So we have the mourning part of it, but again, is it a traditional thing? What's the symbolism going on there?
You know, here's what I look at exactly. I thought about that. It's like, what a humbling. This is the king now.
Yeah.
Right.
This is not just some everyday servant in a roundabout way. He's the king. Look how much. That's why God says David's a man after my own heart. David, if we read the scripture, he's very emotional. He's very emotional, and when it comes to God, he's very emotional.
And I guess even more so, he's emotional publicly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this isn't a stoic, you know, holding his head up high kind of reaction. This is publicly, so much so that the people and all the people who were with him did the same thing with it. And I don't, for some reason, I don't want to read too much into it. I don't get it that he made that command, do as I do kind of thing, but that they just naturally followed their leader that way. And I think that's a lesson for us as well. The people will follow us, you know, whether we tell them to or not. They're looking at us and they're following the way our pastors, our Sunday school teachers, our deacons
No doubt.
react. Same
No doubt.
thing here.
And you know what? In us, just as Christians, because people know because of our faith, I tell them. So, you know, when you better be, when you use that term, don't use it loosely.
Right.
You know, and it's something to really focus on. You're right. That's interesting. And I think that's what made David such. I mean, can you imagine a leader today? A leader, you pick one up that's very emotional like this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's why again, the people followed David. Because
Right.
David was almost like he's one of us.
Yeah.
He's one of us.
Interesting, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And so we do see this, David acknowledging that this person here was one of the conspirators.
Right.
And I find it interesting that David could have said, oh Lord, give me a chance to kill him when he have an opportunity because he turned against me. Yeah. But really, his only request in his prayer, which is an interesting kind of request for prayer from God, is, just turn the counsel of this guy into foolishness. You make him ineffective, which I find is an interesting prayer. I don't know if I've ever prayed for necessarily something like that of people I disagree with or my leaders directly. I don't think I've ever said, Lord, I want Obama to fail embarrassingly, or Lord, I want Trump to fail embarrassingly.
Right.
I want their policies to fail, of course, because
the ones we disagree with.
Right.
That's
what I mean.
I would say is like it's a good point because my prayer would be instead of foolishness, I would say even during Obama, look, whether you like people or not, I say, God, please change their hearts somehow, some way. Put people around them. Right. We say it now. Put people around President Trump. Same thing with Barack Obama. I don't care what you have a DNR. I really don't care. I really don't. Yeah. What policy are you going to promote? Right. And that's a great point. I mean, we have to remember that. Yeah. That's right. Foolishness. You're right.
Yeah, it's interesting because what he's praying is that what this revolt is going to be based on is not wisdom,
right?
Which is what we seek.
That's correct.
Right. Instead of the advice being wise counsel, that it would be foolish counsel.
Right. It's that opposite end of
it. Kind of sounds like what they say about us. Huh? Some people, Paul said, who believe in the cross. Some people count as foolishness.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of the parallel when you said it, okay, the parallels with our faith is people look at it. I can't believe you believe in the death and resurrection of a man. Right. Really? Come on.
It's because here's
foolishness.
Yeah. Here's an interesting definition I've heard of the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Right. Knowledge is having information. Right. Wisdom is the application of that information.
Of that fact.
So it's not. So they may have information, but how is that information going to be applied? How is it going to be utilized? Right. And that's where wisdom comes in. Yeah. So God, don't allow that counsel on how to use the information that they have to not be done in a wise fashion. That's right. So interesting.
Yeah, you're right, Howard. I would say, kill that son of a gun. Seriously.
Yeah.
Take him out, God.
Because
I'm the king.
Right.
Who is he to go against me?
Right.
and I'll deal with my son, which he'll probably put him on somewhere else, but he don't believe in discipline. But that's
And so in the very next sentence, I don't know if you notice this, God answers David that prayer, because it starts off with, while David was coming to the summit where God was worshipped, behold, Hushai, who David then turns around and says an odd phrase to him. I think it'd be too much of a burden to me. Which is kind of an odd thing there. I've been trying to figure out what that really meant here. But he says, but if you return to the city and say, to Absalom, I want to be your servant, and get yourself into his, household back again, which is really, that's the answer of how to get Absalom guy foolishness, is by getting some insiders in there. Get that, get that intel.
So God supplied the means.
He supplied the means right there. I mean, sometimes God's answers are not very long in coming. They happen quickly, but we don't always necessarily see that immediately. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, Howard, I don't know how to take that one phrase either.
Yeah.
If you come over with me, then you're going to be a burden.
You'll be a burden.
I don't like you, but I've got a job for you.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Maybe the guy had a kind of a personality that we had to get him somewhere else useful. I don't know. It just it's an odd thing to say, and I've been trying to figure out if there's some deeper meaning to that.
yeah, that's good point. I don't know.
And I don't know.
Got to chew on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Give me a
Right.
burden.
Right. All right, so we get in, and we see that David has, explaining, how he can get interfaced into the Absalom's camp here. And so in verse 37, I find it interesting. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city. Some of the commentators talk about this word friend being kind of a different kind of friend, not a real buddy,
Like an acquaintance.
but more of a useful friend.
Yeah, like a business relationship.
Yeah.
That's where the burden comes in. I think burdens are, again, through translation.
Yeah.
Like now, if you
Not
read
like-
that verse, I think it's basically, I really can't use you here.
Right.
I need you over there
Right.
because I got to get the information.
It's not that friend of God,
Right.
but this is,
This is
David's
it.
friend.
I got a
It's
job
slightly
for you.
different way of using that word. Yeah. And bam, as Emerald would say, just as Absalom was entering Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going to stop there. So
Yeah.
we're going to see some more interesting things in the next few weeks. Okay. We're going to stop here. We're going to pray. Okay.